I'd like to thank very, very much Mrs. Martin for hosting this event. And also, of course, Rabbi Felix for helping to organize it. I feel extremely, extremely honored to be here today. And I have to tell you that you could ask people in my Beis Medrash, I'm basically glued to the seats. If people ask me where I live, I tell them I live in Sanhedria, where there is a Beis Medrash. I just sleep in Haino. But I felt that for this Aseres Teshuvah, the Rabbi Yonah says that one of the main things of Teshuvah is to help other people doing Teshuvah. And as the Rishonim explain that if everybody hasn't done Teshuvah properly, then nobody's done Teshuvah properly. We're all one person. Klal Yisrael is all one entity, one group, as you might say. And there I felt it was imperative to come here to America to speak about my latest work, Praying with Joy 3. I have to tell you, I've been working on it for 15 years, and I put blood and sweat into it, and I tried to make it as clear as possible, but not just clear, but to get to the depth of the vidui. You know, some people have commented that Praying with Joy 3 is a very strange name for a book about Yom Kippur. Most people associate Yom Kippur with sadness, crying. In fact, someone told me the other day that her brother felt that a successful Yom Kippur was if he got black and blue marks on his chest from banging. You know, the more that you bang, the more successful Yom Kippur is. You like bang out your Aseres. But it doesn't work like that. It's much more complex. And in fact, if we use Yom Kippur right, it should be a happy day. The commentators say that the Suda that we eat, the festive meal that we eat on Friday, every Yom Kippur, should really be on Yom Kippur. And in fact, if a person has to eat on Yom Kippur, we say Yalla V'Yom in the pension. It's a holiday, it's a festival. It's really a happy day. We don't stop eating because we're mourning, like on Teshuvah. We stop eating because we don't need to eat. We're so close to Hashem that we really are not required to eat because we're totally absorbed with the day. And it's not easy. It's not easy when you're fasting and it's a hot day and the prayers are very, very long and they seem to go on and on and on. So that's why I felt it was imperative, it's so important to try to find a key, to try to find a link to get into the tefillah of Vidui and to try to open it up as well. Now I'll just give you a little background information. There was one question which really inspired this book, which I'm working on 15, maybe 20 years, is, as was mentioned, the pairs of the Vidui. If you look at the Vidui, and I wish, the truth is I would like everyone to have a copy of this book during the Shir, even if you wouldn't want to buy it, which I think would be a mistake. But I think it would be good. You can even open the package. Everybody should take one. By the way, my mom is here. This is Mrs. Chavez, and she's behind it. She deserves credit for everything. I would like everyone to have a copy because I think it'll make the Shir and the much more meaningful. If anyone else wants to open that package and help give them out on the table, whether people buy them or not, that's not important. The main thing is that it should be a different.
These are ours. These belong to the Yemei group. The Shir is dedicated to my parents, Cyril Dr. Sholdav and Yoshua and Anya. But if you want to purchase them, the Rub has sperm that you can purchase.
It's probably that's enough.
These are ours that you need to give it back.
Okay. I want to, just since we're being filmed, I want to state that this year is only for women. The men are not allowed to watch this. This is specifically geared for women this year, and I'll explain myself as we go on. As the sperm are being given out, I'll just point out to you the point which is developed from the Sefer and the Shir, is that if you look in the Vidui, let's turn to page 44, because I'm going to start with that. Think before you speak. You'll notice that all, in the Al-Khayd, everything's in pairs of two. According to the alphabet, according to the aleph base, everything's in pairs of two. And it very much bothered me. There's so many transgressions that could possibly be listed amongst each letter of the alphabet. Aleph, Beis, Gimel. Why did the Tefillah pick these two? Now, the more a person studies Torah, I'm sure you're all aware of that, the more deep you realize it is, and the farther back you go, the more deep the Torah is. This tefillah originally is very, very old. It goes back to the times of the Goinim, which is, we're talking about over 1,000 years ago, perhaps even before that. And my understanding is that there was very, very great wisdom implanted in this tefillah, which could really help to answer our question, how could we have an enjoyable Yom Kippur, and how could we really feel extremely, extremely elevated, and after Yom Kippur be a completely different person, which is really the goal of Yom Kippur, right? And my question was, why were these two transgressions picked in every case, number one? And number two, is there some sort of correlation between these two, right? And I thought about it for a long time, and my conclusion was that the tefillah is giving us a very, very deep insight into what Teshuvah is really all about. A lot of people make the mistake, they think that Teshuvah is all about regret, charata, feeling bad about Toshin Ayin Gimel. It was not a great year for all of us because we did a lot of averos, right? We did a tremendous number of mitzvahs. But if we focus and harbor on all the things we did wrong, we could come out of Yom Kippur depressed. And that's not the goal. While charata, while regret is an important part of Teshuvah, it's not the main part of Teshuvah. The main part of Teshuvah is Kabbalah al-Asid, is next year. Tavshin Ayin Dav, and not Tavshin Ayin Gimel. I'll just tell you over a beautiful idea I heard recently from my Rosh Hashiva, which really brings this out, from Tzviko Shalevsky. He said, we have a principle in Tanakh, that wherever it says, Vayehi, right, it's sad. Vayehi b'yemei Achashverosh, that's a sad pasuk. And Vahayo, whenever it says Vahayo, it's happy. So what's this all about? He explained the Vav in these words is the Vav HaHipuch. It turns the word around. So Vayehi means the present. Vav makes it the past. Vahayo is the past, it makes it the present. Said Rav Kushelevsky that the past is sad because it's done, it's finished, it's over with. The future is exciting, it's fresh, and it's happy, and there's a lot to be said about it, and it could be great and change. And that is the main part of Teshuvah. The main part of Teshuvah is how is Tavshin Ayin Daled going to be, and that should be our main focus on Yom Kippur. And I believe that is implanted here in the Vidui Tefillah, as I'm going to try to explain. Now, I said here that this shir is specifically geared towards women, and today I'm just going to talk about transgressions that have to do with speaking. The Gemara says that there were 10 portions. The Gemara in Kedushin says that there were 10 portions of speech given over to the world, and it says women got 9 of them. You know, so all the men make fun of the women. Yeah, you go to a chasna, you listen to women's side, there's a lot of talking. You know, but it's not correct pshat. It's not correct understanding. The deeper understanding, the correct understanding, is that women have the ability to elevate the power of speech much more than men. And in fact, the Maharal explains that when God said to Abram, Tishma l'kolo, listen to Sarah, it was because Sarah had a greater ability of prophecy than Abram, right? Tishma l'kolo. And the Maharal says that women have, let's call it the monopoly on speech. They have the power of speech much greater than men, and they have the ability to elevate it much more than men. They also have the ability to downgrade it, right? If you're talking, you could say lashon hara, or if you're talking, you could say good things like vidui and positive things about people. So this year I'm going to specifically focus on these transgressions that have to do with speaking, specifically lashon hara. I have here tickets to Olam Haba, which have the major halachas of Olam Haba all together on one card. I'll give them out at the end. It's on them. No, it's not. This is always the power of being filmed, is that you... yeah.
Spare batteries.
That works.
See, it's working, spare batteries. It's not working also.
Yeah, that's right.
No, it's their batteries, it's their batteries.
Okay, hopefully we're good now. So we're talking about women's ability to elevate speech, and today I'm specifically going to focus on those. Tonight I'm speaking again in Shari Tefillah. I'm going to speak about other aspects of the Vidui of Yom Kippur. Today I'm going to focus on 6 or 7 parts of the Vidui, which specifically have to do with speech. Right? And while we're here on page 44, we have this pair, Lidas, minutes, and Reisman. The Malbim says a very interesting idea. The word bitoy, we often use the word bitoy for talking about speech. It's like an explosion. I'm sure you've all had that feeling. You have something to say, and you just have to say it. It's like exploding from your lips. It's a bitoy sfasayim. Yeah? When you have that feeling, beware, because there's a good chance that it's lashon hara. Right? The Vilna Gaon opens up a door for us to fighting the Yetzer Hara. He says that if you're too excited, it's probably coming from the Yetzer Hara. If you're too excited to say something to somebody, there's a good chance it's coming from the Yetzer Hara. Because he says the Yetzer Hara Tov doesn't have to get excited. It has good schayra, it has good things to sell. So it doesn't have to make you excited. The Yetzer Hara uses a tactic, a tremendous excitement, to get you to sin. Now it's not always the case. A person could be excited about mitzvahs. You just have to beware. So that's bitoy sfasayim. Bitoy sfasayim is an explosion of the lips. I have to say something, I have to say it. And we know, we all felt that, especially when it comes to lashon hara. Right? Now, one of the biggest problems is people don't know what lashon hara is. Sometimes you're obligated to say something bad about someone, right? You have to do it in the way that the Torah lays down, the rules. But you have to say it. If you don't say it, you could be considered a transgression. You could, if a couple is about to go out, and there's a definite serious problem, which they have to know about, and they don't know, you could be ruining people's lives. I know people have done that. That happened. Information has been withheld unjustly and unhalachically proper, and they've gotten divorced afterwards, their lives have been ruined. A person could be almost a murderer for keeping quiet. But at the same time, if you speak, you could be considered a murderer for saying something. So we have to use das. We have to think about it. And this, I think, here is the key. The key to lashon hara. Rav Scheinberg once told me, he said, the Yetzer Hara is not thinking. That's the primary Yetzer Hara, is not thinking. If we want to avoid lashon hara, right, the tefillah is guiding us here. How can you avoid lashon hara? What's the biggest weapon and tool how to avoid lashon hara? That's to use your thinking ability. As I write here, think before you speak. There's a big Rosh Yeshiva in Yerushalayim. His name is Rabbi Chait. He's the Rosh Yeshiva of Chavetz Chaim Yeshiva. And I speak every year for women at Yemei, Yerushalayim, during their Shmir Solashon conference. One time, right before I spoke, I was davening mincha in Sanhedria, and I met Rabbi Chait, and he said, it's known that you're very careful lashon hara. What's your secrets? Tell me what your secret is. He said, before I speak, he said, I count to one. I count to one before I'm about to say. Even you don't have to be out loud. Just think one. Yeah? And then I speak. That 1 second delay. Now, I'll tell you, there's a story, there's a book, very good book called What's Wrong with Being Human from Rabbi Yisrael Miller in Pittsburgh. He writes there that there was a certain Yid, a certain Jew, who used to wait 20 minutes thinking before he said something. Now you can imagine he didn't have long conversations. Yeah? And no fights with his wife. But it was a little hard to talk to him, 20 minutes in between his conversation. We're not asking for 20 minutes. Yeah? Initially when I asked him, he said, count to 3. I said, but that's too hard. Count to 1. Think for a second before you speak. Right? We have to train ourselves to think before we speak. And that's the secret, that's the depth that the tefillah is pointing out to us. How, not just to stop. A person who makes a acceptance, a kabbalah on themselves, for Tashin Ayin Dayat, not to speak lashon hara, that will last probably 5 minutes until he's walking out of shul and someone says, that chazan was lousy, no? He says, yeah, terrible. Next year, get someone else. It lasted 5 minutes. The secret, the way to stop speaking lashon hara is to find the root of the problem. And that is what I'm trying to show here with the Sefer for every avera. For every avera that you would like to stop doing, find the root of the problem. I gave the following analogy, which I think is very appropriate. Right? I just actually landed yesterday, and I hadn't slept for about 36 hours. I wasn't able to sleep on the plane, and my head was killing me. I took some Tylenol, and Baruch Hashem, I felt much better. But let's say a person has a toothache, and you go to the dentist, and really you need root canal. The dentist says, take some Tylenol. You take some Tylenol. A month later, you have to go to the hospital for an operation. That's what happens if you don't deal with the root of the problem. And root canal is really the root, right? If you don't get your root canal, then you're going to be suffering much more later, right? The secret of Teshuvah is to get to the root of the problem. And that's what the video here is telling us. And this is just one example here. Without thinking, if we want to stop the explosion of the lips, the way to do that is to think. 1 second, count to 1 before you speak. Now, you're not going to be successful all the time. But if you're successful even 10% of the time, that's an incredible accomplishment. To speak 10% less Lashon Hara, that's amazing. And if you do that, eventually it will get less and less and less. The hardest part about Lashon Hara is the habits. We're in the habit of Lashon Hara. And for this reason, I will get to this soon about the ticket to Olam Haba, I put all the halachas, the primary halachas of Lashon Hara, one index card and one small card. You should carry it around and remember it. And I have an acronym also. But we'll get to that. Okay. Before we get to that, I want to give you another example here, which is really the flip side of this example. If you turn to page 50. Turn to page 50. Now, before we start that, I want to give you a beautiful, beautiful idea from the Gemara. The Gemara in Erechin, Daf Tez Zayin and Beis, 16b. It says an amazing thing about the tongue. Right? Amazing. It's a unique organ in the body, the tongue. Why is that? Because most of the organs are ready to go. Your fingers, you just go like this, they're ready to go. The tongue, though, says the Gemara, has 3 fences around it. And what are they? You have the mouth, the teeth, and the fact that it's in a lying down position. You have to pick it up, right? I always give the example, if you would see a nuclear weapon, they don't keep nuclear weapons down here in Mrs. Martin's basement. And there's a reason for that, because they're dangerous, yeah? You don't even put them in the army base in a room. You put it deep underneath the ground in tunnels, and then you have to have special cards to get through the gates and doors and locks. 3 gates were put on the mouth, because it's very, very dangerous. The tongue is the most dangerous organ that exists in the body. And therefore, it needs great, great guarding and protecting. That's why the David HaMelech tells us, guard your tongue. Guard your tongue. We have to guard it. Okay, so we spoke about one way to guard your tongue. One way to guard your tongue is by thinking. Yeah? To think before you speak. The flip side is sometimes we think too much. Sometimes somebody will insult us, say something that we really don't appreciate. Yeah? Dr. Rabbi Avram Tversky had a beautiful way of expressing this. You know, I'll tell you a story. This is a horrible story. I hate to say this even in public, but I have to say it because it happens. And if it happened, it means we have not yet fixed up the transgression of Sinas Chinam of the Beis HaMikdash. And I'll share it with you. I hope no one gets too upset about it, but we should all take it to heart because it really happened. I was a witness. We live in Har Nof neighborhood in Yerushalayim, and our neighbor, we have neighbors, their name is Kapinski. One of the copies of Praying with Joy, one was dedicated in the daughter's memory. They had a daughter who passed away. She was 14. Motzei Teshuvah, she just didn't wake up. A day after Teshuvah. 14, they have no idea what happened. Anyway, I went to the Shiva because he's a close friend of mine many years. And it was I think it was the day after the Levaya. Somebody else from the neighborhood came to visit, and he made the following comments. He said, I don't understand what's wrong. You have 7 other kids. Why are you so upset? Now, can you imagine? I thought, I wanted to take out a gun and shoot the guy. Baruch Hashem, I don't carry a gun. But I did make a comment that I think Eov's friends said a similar thing. And I was just astounded that someone could say such a thing. Rabbi Dr. Avram Tversky once made the following observation. He said, how would you feel like at the end of such brilliant consolation? Right? It's amazing that people could say, and that again comes from not thinking. If we think for 1 minute, and I spoke to the Avel, 8 months later, he still remembered it, and he was still hurt by it. On the other hand, I have to tell you, there was a rabbi there, his name is Rabbi Ben Murgi, and he's a close Talmud of Rav David Morgenstern in Yerushalayim. He said, Rav Morgenstern had a daughter pass away, and so did Rabbi Kiva Eger, the wife of the Chasam Sofer passed away. He said, it must be that this something that happens to great people. That was such an amazing, and it was in 5 minutes, one or the other. It was such a lesson in contrast of how words can kill and how words can bring back to life. Right? Luckily, the second one came after the first one. We have to be very, very careful of our tongues. And sometimes we think too little, but sometimes we think too much. And that's page 50. Page 50, Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'das u'mirma, with knowledge and deceit. V'al chet shechatan lefanecha b'dibur peh. Dibur peh is overly harsh. The particular example I gave you was without thinking. But sometimes someone will get a very, very harsh reaction from somebody. They have no. He says if a person has a bad feeling, let's say he feels revenge, he feels hatred, he feels something bad in his heart, he says it's only a matter of time before it comes out, in his speech or in his actions. Yeah? He says that's the shirish, that's the root of the prohibition against feeling chemda, which is jealousy, all these things, because eventually they'll come out in actions. And that's why, while speaking without thinking is very bad, cluttered up with terrible things like jealousy and hatred and other things that shouldn't really be there, then eventually that will come out in our speech. And that's what we're saying here.